Have you ever felt that your happiness completely depends on someone else? That moment when you realize you've placed all your emotional well-being in someone else's hands, and suddenly you feel that emptiness, that vertigo when that person isn't around. If you're nodding right now, you're not alone. This is one of the most common traps we fall into as human beings, and today we're going to unravel it through the profound wisdom of Carl Jung. Imagine for a moment what your life would be like if you could maintain your emotional center intact, no matter what happens around you, without depending on constant validation, without needing others to fill your internal voids. That feeling of inner solidity, of peace that comes from within and not from external circumstances. Isn't that what we're all ultimately seeking? Carl Jung, one of the most revolutionary thinkers in modern psychology, dedicated much of his life to understanding why we're so prone to seek outside what we can only find within, and what he discovered forever changed our understanding of the human psyche. Jung understood that true emotional independence begins with a journey inward, toward those parts of ourselves that we've ignored, rejected, or simply never explored. He called it the process of individuation, that path through which we become whole beings, complete in ourselves. But let's be honest, this isn't an easy path. Our society is designed to keep us distracted, to make us believe that happiness lies in the next achievement, the next relationship, the next purchase. The modern world bombards us with messages that reinforce emotional dependence. You're not complete without your other half. You need this to be happy. Without this, you're not enough. And there's the trap that Jung identified so clearly. Every time you seek your worth and happiness outside yourself, you're giving away your power. You're saying, "I am not enough on my own." And this belief, often unconscious, is the root of all emotional dependence. Think about your current relationships. How many times have you felt anxiety when that special person doesn't respond to your messages right away? How many times has your mood completely depended on how your partner, your boss, or even a stranger on the street treated you? Those moments of excessive vulnerability are signs that you've placed your emotional center outside yourself. Jung taught us that this tendency isn't a personal flaw or weakness. It's the natural result of not having integrated fundamental parts of our psyche. When we don't recognize our shadow, those parts of ourselves that we've repressed because we consider them unacceptable, we project onto others both our fears and our deepest needs. Here lies one of Jung's most revolutionary teachings. What irritates us most, what attracts us most obsessively, what makes us feel dependent on others, is a reflection of what we haven't recognized in ourselves. Let me give you a concrete example. Perhaps you're someone who has always been the strong one, the one who's always there for others, the one who never shows vulnerability. You've repressed your need to be cared for, to receive support, to be vulnerable. And then someone appears in your life who makes you feel protected, who finally allows you to let your guard down. Suddenly you become emotionally dependent on this person because they represent that part of yourself that you've never allowed yourself to express. The paradox is fascinating. You can only be truly emotionally independent when you've integrated all your parts, even those that seem to make you weak or dependent. When you recognize and accept your need for connection, support, love, but don't expect others to completely satisfy it, that's when you begin to experience genuine emotional autonomy. Jung understood this perfectly. People do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This phrase holds the key to emotional independence. It's not about denying our needs or building walls to avoid being hurt. It's about making conscious everything we've kept in the shadow. Now, how do we begin this process? How can we develop that inner strength that allows us to be in relationships without emotionally depending on them? The first step, according to Jung, is to recognize our projections. Whenever you feel a disproportionate emotional reaction towards someone, whether extreme adoration or visceral rejection, ask yourself, what part of me am I seeing in this person that I haven't recognized in myself? This simple exercise in self-awareness can be revolutionary. Because when you begin to see that what entraps you in others is a reflection of what you haven't integrated in yourself, you start to reclaim your power. You no longer need others to represent those parts of you. You can begin to live them yourself. The second step is what Jung called confronting the shadow. We all have aspects of ourselves that we consider unacceptable, whether our anger, our vulnerability, our deepest desires, or our most intense fears. The natural tendency is to repress them, hide them not only from the world, but from our own consciousness. But here's the irony: what we repress doesn't disappear. It simply goes into the shadows and from there controls our life. Have you noticed how sometimes you act in ways you later don't understand? How you find yourself repeating patterns that you consciously reject? That's your shadow operating. Jung invites us to an act of courage, to look directly at those parts we've rejected, not to judge them, but to integrate them. Because only when we accept everything we are, the light and the dark, the strong and the vulnerable, can we achieve that inner solidity that makes us truly independent. Imagine for a moment that you've spent your whole life repressing your anger because you grew up believing that good people never get angry. That repressed anger doesn't disappear. It finds indirect ways to manifest: passive aggressiveness, resentment, or even physical illnesses. And most interestingly, you become magnetically attracted to or repelled by people who freely express their anger. Emotional dependence arises precisely from this dynamic. We seek in others what we don't allow ourselves to be. We need people who express for us the emotions we've repressed, who live for us the parts we've denied. But when you begin to recognize and accept your own anger, when you consciously integrate it into your life in healthy ways, you no longer need others to live it for you. You no longer feel overwhelmed or fascinated by the expression of anger in others. You've reclaimed that part of yourself, and with it, a bit more of your emotional independence. This work with the shadow is profound and requires courage. But as Jung said, there is no birth of consciousness without pain. The price of emotional freedom is facing what we've avoided, sometimes throughout our entire lives. The third step toward emotional independence is what Jung called withdrawing the projections. Once you've recognized which parts of yourself you're seeing in others, you can begin to withdraw those projections and reclaim those energies as your own. This is particularly important in romantic relationships. How many times do we idealize our partner at the beginning, projecting all our fantasies of perfection onto them, only to later feel devastated when reality emerges? Jung understood that this cycle of idealization disillusionment is inevitable as long as we continue projecting our unrecognized parts onto others. True intimacy, the deep connection we all yearn for, is only possible when we've withdrawn these projections. When you can see another person as they really are, not as a repository for your own unrecognized needs, that's when you can relate from a place of authenticity and freedom. And here is where Jung's teaching becomes truly revolutionary. Contrary to what we might think, developing emotional independence doesn't lead us to isolation or detachment. It leads us to more authentic, deeper, and more satisfying relationships. Because when you no longer need others to complete the missing parts of your psyche, you can relate from fullness, not from lack. You can love not because you need something from the other, but because you choose to share your completeness with that person. As Jung said, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But let's be realistic. This path to emotional independence isn't linear or quick. It's not something you achieve in a weekend or after reading a book. It's an ongoing process, a lifelong commitment to your own growth. There will be days when you'll feel completely centered, solid in your personal power. And there will be others when old dependencies reappear, when you'll feel vulnerable and needy. Jung reminds us that this is normal, that it's part of the process. Individuation isn't a destination, it's a journey. The important thing is not to judge yourself when you notice these emotional dependencies resurfacing. Instead, observe them with curiosity. Ask yourself, what part of me is seeking recognition here? What legitimate need exists behind this dependency? Because, and this is crucial, developing emotional independence doesn't mean denying our basic human needs for connection, love, and belonging. Jung never suggested that we should become completely self-sufficient beings who need no one. What he proposed was much more subtle and profound, that we recognize our needs as legitimate, but that we don't expect others to completely satisfy them. That we cultivate such a rich relationship with our inner world that although we deeply value our connections, we don't depend on them for our basic stability. Think of it this way. It's like having an internal center of gravity so solid that although life's storms may shake you, you can always regain your balance. The people in your life enrich your experience, support you, accompany you, but they aren't the foundation of your stability. One of the most powerful tools Jung left us for developing this emotional independence is the relationship with our unconscious. Unlike Freud, who saw the unconscious primarily as a repository of repressed impulses, Jung understood it as a source of wisdom, creativity, and guidance. Jung developed techniques such as active imagination, a conscious dialogue with the figures of our unconscious, and dream analysis not as mere curiosities, but as bridges to those parts of us that need integration. When you establish a conscious relationship with your unconscious, something magical happens. You begin to discover that the wisdom, guidance, and comfort you've sought outside have always been within you. You discover inner voices of strength, compassion, and intuition that can sustain you in the most difficult moments. This connection with your unconscious is a powerful antidote to emotional dependence. As Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." Another fundamental aspect of developing emotional independence is what Jung called living symbolically. This means finding meaning and purpose beyond personal relationships, connecting with something larger than oneself. Jung observed that many people deposit all their need for meaning and purpose in their relationships, especially romantic ones. They expect another person to give them not only love, but also direction, meaning, and existential validation. This is an impossible burden for any relationship and a sure recipe for emotional dependence. When you find a purpose that passionates you, when you connect with values that transcend your immediate needs, you naturally develop more emotional independence. You no longer need others to give you a sense of purpose. You've found it yourself. It can be through art, service to others, connection with nature, spirituality, or any activity that connects you with something larger than yourself. The important thing is that this sense of purpose doesn't completely depend on the validation or participation of specific other people. Jung firmly believed in the importance of this spiritual or symbolic dimension. For him, many modern psychological problems, including emotional dependence, arose from a life devoid of symbolic meaning. As he once said, modern man does not understand how much his rationalism has put him at the mercy of the psychic underworld. Now perhaps you're wondering, can I really achieve this emotional independence? Isn't it asking too much in a world that seems designed to foster dependence? Jung's answer would be clear. Not only can you, but you must. Because the cost of emotional dependence is too high. It not only robs you of your power and freedom, but also prevents the kind of relationships you truly yearn for. Think about it. When you emotionally depend on someone, you're not really seeing them. You're seeing a repository for your own needs, a vehicle for your completeness, and that person will inevitably feel the weight of that impossible expectation. The most satisfying and lasting relationships aren't those based on mutual need, but on mutual enrichment. Like two complete trees growing together, intertwining their branches but maintaining their own firm roots. Jung expressed it beautifully. Know all the theories, master all the techniques, but as you touch a human soul, be just another human soul. This is the essence of relationships that arise from emotional independence. The authentic encounter between two complete beings, not the desperate fusion of two incomplete halves. And here is where many misinterpret the message. Developing emotional independence doesn't mean becoming cold, distant, or detached. It doesn't mean building walls to protect yourself. In fact, it means exactly the opposite. When you've developed true emotional independence, you can be more vulnerable, more open, and more present in your relationships. Because you no longer fear that rejection or loss will destroy you. You no longer need to manipulate or control to ensure your needs are met. You can simply be there, fully present, offering your truth and receiving the others without overwhelming expectations. This is what Jung called the paradox of love. Only when you don't desperately need another's love to feel complete can you experience love in its purest and most transformative form. Imagine for a moment how your relationships would be if you could approach them from this place of inner fullness. If you could say, "I don't need you to complete me, but I choose to share my life with you." Wouldn't that completely change the dynamic? Wouldn't it free both parties from an impossible burden? The path to this emotional independence begins with small steps. Start by observing your dependencies without judging them. Notice when your emotional state is completely determined by another person's actions or words. And in those moments, instead of reacting, take a deep breath and ask yourself, what do I need to give myself right now? Cultivate practices that connect you with your center. Meditation, time in nature, artistic creation, reflective writing, any activity that allows you to hear your inner voice above the external noise. Develop a relationship with your shadow. Identify those parts of yourself that you've repressed or denied and begin the courageous work of integrating them. Remember what Jung taught us. It's not by looking at the light that we free ourselves, but by making the darkness conscious. Find a purpose that passionates you, something that gives you a sense of meaning beyond your personal relationships. Cultivate connections with a broader community, with nature, with principles that transcend the immediate. And perhaps most importantly, practice self-compassion when you fail. Because you will fail. There will be days when you'll feel completely dependent, when fear of abandonment or rejection will seem to consume you. In those moments, remember that this too is part of the journey. It's not a setback, it's an opportunity to learn, to integrate another layer of your shadow. Jung reminded us that the process of individuation, that path towards psychological completeness and emotional independence, is not something we complete once and for all. It's a lifelong commitment, a continuous dance between conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, dependence and independence. The good news is that each step in this direction brings its own rewards. You don't need to be perfectly emotionally independent to begin experiencing greater freedom, more authentic relationships, and a deeper sense of inner peace. Every time you choose to look at yourself instead of blaming others, every time you emotionally sustain yourself in a difficult moment, every time you recognize a projection and withdraw it, you're strengthening your inner center. And over time, those small acts of courage and self-awareness create profound change. As Jung said, the shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. So I invite you to begin this journey, or to continue it if you've already started. To look at your emotional dependencies not as failures, but as signals pointing to parts of yourself that need attention and integration. To discover, step by step, the freedom that comes from not depending on anyone for your basic happiness and emotional stability. Remember, others can complement your happiness. They can enormously enrich your life, but the foundation, the center, must come from within. As Jung said, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. And when you awaken to this truth, when you begin to live from this solid center, you not only transform yourself, but also all your relationships. You no longer attract people who reinforce your old patterns of dependence. You attract those who respect and celebrate your autonomy, who don't want to possess you but to walk beside you. So I ask you, are you ready to take the first step? To begin exploring those parts of yourself that you've projected onto others? To build, day by day, that inner strength that no one can give you or take away? The journey may seem intimidating, but remember what Jung taught us. The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that fits all cases. Your path to emotional independence will be unique as your own psyche. There is no single formula, no rigid steps to follow. What matters is your commitment to knowing yourself more deeply, to integrating more and more parts of yourself, to withdrawing your projections and reclaiming your power. And in this journey, you're not alone. If this message has resonated with you, if you've felt that inner recognition that says, yes, this is true, share this video with someone you think might benefit from it. Leave a comment sharing your own experience with emotional dependence or independence. Be part of this community of people committed to their inner growth. Subscribe to this channel for more content exploring Jung's profound teachings and how to apply them to our daily lives. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss upcoming videos where we'll continue to unveil the keys to a more conscious, free, and authentic life. Remember, true power isn't in controlling others or making them meet your needs. It's in that inner stillness, that solidity that comes from having found yourself, from having chosen yourself again and again. As Jung said, "I am what I am to the world, but within I am only a complicated child who still hasn't lost his innocence." Allow yourself that vulnerability, that openness to the continuing mystery that you are. And from that place of authenticity, discover true emotional independence, not as a wall that separates you from others, but as a bridge that allows you to connect from freedom, not from need. Thank you for joining me in this exploration, for your time, your attention, and your openness to these ideas. The mere fact that you're here listening to these words is already an act of courage, a step in your own journey of discovery. Until next time, and remember, your happiness is your responsibility. It's the most precious gift you can give yourself and, paradoxically, to everyone you love.